It's August 13th, 1920. Adolf Hitler is standing in front of a crowd of thousands of people in Munich. He speaks continuously for 2 hours. During his 2-hour speech, he's interrupted 58 times by standing cheers from the entire crowd. That is one standing ovation every 2 minutes by thousands of people all together. And what did he say that supercharged this crowd? Listen to this. The Jews are parasites. The Jew is unable to create his own state because it requires a lot of social sense. The Jew has not become purified. Instead, the Jew has practiced inbreeding. This is a reference to the cousin marriages among Jews. And now, the day is April 12th, 1922. Once again in Munich. Hitler amps up the rhetoric with another anti-Jew speech. And this time, to an even bigger crowd. He says, the Jew has not grown poorer. He gradually gets bloated. The Jew regards work as a means to the exploitation of other peoples. And then, it's not necessary to be an enemy of the Jew for him to drag you one day. But it was his 30th January 1939 prophecy speech in Berlin that chillingly gave out the upcoming Holocaust. Once again, I will be a prophet. Should the international Jewry succeed in plunging mankind into yet another world war, then the result will not be a victory of the Jewry, but the annihilation of the Jewish race in Europe. People desire not to perish on the battlefield just so that this ruthless internationalist race can profit financially from this war and thereby gratify its lust for vengeance derived from the Old Testament. Now tell me, what would you expect loyal followers of a leader to do after repeatedly listening to such words? It's a no-brainer. This speech finally set the wheels of the Holocaust in motion, and as a result, 6 million Jews were systematically eliminated in the cities, in the gas chambers, and in the concentration camps around Europe. And now fast forward to the 21st century. The former US President Donald Trump, when elected, spoke praises of Kim Jong-un of North Korea for his absolute control of power in his country. Kim Jong-un was the first foreign leader Donald Trump visited. In spite of the disastrous impact Kim Jong-un's policies had on his own people and on the other countries in his neighborhood. Kim Jong-un's sole qualification to win Trump's admiration? An absolute, unquestioned, and ruthless father-to-son rule, the kind of ruler Donald Trump himself wanted to be in the US. Trump was also good friends with Vladimir Putin of Russia for his ruthless suffocating of the opposition in his own country. Putin had put the only opposition figure in Russia, Alexei Navalny, behind bars for 30 years on questionable charges of extremism. He openly admitted trusting the words of Putin over the words of his own institutions. Trump clearly brewed disdain for any dissent, any opposition to his word, no matter how minor the opposition. He advocated such summary punishments like Putin's for his own political opponents in the US. Remember the lock her up chants for Hillary Clinton that he led at Republican rallies? He notoriously labeled his political opponents as vermin, a term historically used to dehumanize and justify violence during Rwandan genocide. His proud claim of being an election denier and his framing of internal threats as more sinister than the external ones further deepened America's political divide. His constant inciting rhetoric culminated into a violent, armed mob attack on the US Capitol Hill on January 6, 2021. Majority of the people saw this sort of violent attack coming already before it happened. It was written all over Donald Trump's rhetoric. And it hasn't stopped yet. Since then, the danger of another violent attack anywhere on political opponents is always looming closer than ever. The former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi's husband, was almost killed by an attacker in their own house. This attacker was motivated by Trump's frequent extreme rhetoric against Pelosi, even after the January 6th attack on Capitol Hill. And now, in Pakistan, former Prime Minister Imran Khan's unrelenting, aggressive, demeaning ridicule of his opponents has led to many incidents of mob violence and public harassment against his political opponents, including violent, harassing mobs chasing female political opponents walking alone on the public streets. Such personal attacks are given the color of public protest. Instead of controlling his followers on such acts of mob violence, just like Donald Trump, Imran Khan would further double down instead of backing down. He would rather encourage his followers to continue such chases in public and in private, all the way to the private family homes of his political opponents. His public speeches and his daily nighttime YouTube addresses would call upon his followers to rise and resist if the state tried to assert its writ when he was finally ousted from his office through a parliamentary vote of no confidence. He started attacking state institutions when his allies and his party leaders started abandoning him for his incitement to violence speeches. He continued calling his followers to resist by any means necessary, including force, when he saw his legal options limiting. His coded calls for armed attacks against state institutions and his political opponents led to a ban on broadcasting his speeches on state media. His criticism of the police, the judiciary, and other state institutions constantly called for a confrontation with almost everyone and no peace whatsoever in the name of his self-declared high moral ideals. For his belligerent attitude towards all friends and foes, he was left isolated even internationally. No single leader anywhere in the world came to his rescue when he was finally put behind bars for misusing public funds. He even threatened a violent breaking up of the country if he was not given a special exception from the legal proceedings against him. His my way or no way approach not only strained Pakistan's democratic fabric, but also risked institutional destabilization and increased political polarization to a point of violent civil disturbance in the country. And finally, turning to India, Prime Minister Narendra Modi's self-righteous rhetoric with a religious undertone has often been extremely divisive in this country of 1.5 billion people, with thousands of ethnic and religious communities. He often labels all his political opponents corrupt as human beings, period. He equates the big umbrella universal appeal of the main opposition Congress Party to all ethnic and religious minorities as religious appeasement, just as some countries of Europe were accused of appeasement to Hitler when they were trying to work things out to avoid a war with powerful Germany in the 1940s. Modi's speech pattern also reflects as us versus them mindset. There is no middle ground with any of these self-centered, self-righteous, divisive leaders. Their divisive rhetoric, their angry words deepen fissures in their societies and undermine secular and democratic foundations in the societies wherever they get a chance to come into power. Across all these examples of violence-prone, self-centered leaders, there runs a common thread of hate and anger in their words. Their use of divisive and demonizing language has profound destructive implications that may last for generations. Their scaremongering tactics breed hatred in their societies. Their exaggerated fears of annihilation of their followers incite them to hate their fellow men. Their aggressive postures with veiled threats of mob force undermine democratic institutions and polarize societies. Universal principles of coexistence, on the other hand, encourage inclusive and respectful dialogue with political opponents, emphasizing unity over division. As we reflect on these cases of hysteric, vile leaderships, it's a fact that these hate-flaming leaders wield immense power through their angry words. But with this huge power often comes a responsibility to foster harmony and understanding among their followers for their opponents, and not the calls for annihilation of all opposition. Such calls have led to mass destruction and genocide in the past. We cannot let that history repeat itself. These leaders could very well become leaders of all the people, their own followers and those who follow others, only if they could broaden their umbrellas to accommodate everyone with their message of peace and coexistence for all. With this message of peace, I am Dr. Salim, signing out from Subha Subha America se.